A boat covered 35 sea miles in a single day. By nightfall, it had gained 14 hours. 8 people working the whole time. Nobody aboard made a mistake. That gap has nothing to do with seamanship. It's the business. Those figures were not written down in the 11th century. A crew recorded them in 2004, testing a full-size copy of a freighter that a Danish shard had been holding onto for 900 years. Which brings us to the strange thing about Viking commerce. Not one merchant's account book survives. No purchase price, no sale figure, no wage bill, no tax record, no profit line. We have hulls. We have cargo. We do not have the ledger. So, we're going to build one, and I'll show you every number we're guessing at. Start here. Say the weather cooperates, you reach market, and every last item sells. 20 tons gone, silver on the table, buyers happy. You are still only halfway to earning anything. Quick one while we load her. Furs or stone? What goes in your hold? One word below. I'll come back later and tell you what that choice was worth. Let's cost her out, plank by plank. Begin with the object, because it exists and you can go and look at it. In 1962, archaeologists lifted 5 wrecks out of Roskilde Fjord in Denmark. Somebody had scuttled them there on purpose, centuries earlier, to block a channel against attack. A cheap barricade that turned into an accidental museum. The largest cargo vessel among them is catalogued as Skuldelef 1, built around 1030, from western Norwegian timber, most likely near the Sognefjord, just under 16 meters from end to end, nearly 5 meters across at the widest point. She drew about a meter of water, which matters more than it sounds. A meter means you can run her up a shallow beach and unload where there's no harbor at all. Rated to carry roughly 20 tons. Crewed by 6 to 8 people. 2.5 tons of rated capacity for every person aboard, and that ratio is the whole commercial argument. Try shifting 20 tons overland in 1030, and you need carts, oxen, drivers, fodder, guards, and a month of daylight. Wind does it with 8 people and no fodder bill. Here's where the fantasy usually dies, though, and it dies early. This is not a longship. Longships were real, and one came out of the same mud. Skuldelef 2 was 30 meters, built for 65 to 70 men and almost no freight. Skuldelef 3 was the small coastal trader, rated at 4.6 tons. 1 fjord, 3 hulls, 3 completely different businesses. You are not buying a weapon that occasionally carries goods. You're buying a broad, deep, slow platform with an open hold in the middle, high sides, and 2 to 4 oars. Barely enough to nudge her off a beach when the air goes still. The sail does everything else. One detail before we spend anything. Skuldelef 1 was repaired more than once, and the repair timber came from the Oslofjord and from eastern Denmark. Somebody kept this hull working across regions and across years. Maintenance was never a footnote in this business. It was permanent. But the most expensive object aboard isn't in the hold. It's over your head, and it took years to make. 90 square meters of wool. That's your engine. And the fuel is free, which is precisely why nobody prices the thing properly. Between 1999 and 2000, the Viking Ship Museum in Roskilde built a full-scale working copy of Skuldelef 1 and named her Ottar. To make her sail using period methods, the project needed wool from as many as 200 sheep. That fleece became roughly 157 meters of cloth, woven in a narrow band about 65 centimeters across, then stitched together into a single sheet. Dry and finished, it weighed around 90 kilos. Weaving alone ran to nearly 8,000 hours. Put that into a calendar. 7,850 hours is 981 working days at 8 hours each. The museum has its own way of saying it, about 4.5 person years. And that figure covers the loom only. It doesn't count the shearing, the sorting, the cleaning, the spinning, the sewing of panels, the reinforcing of edges, or the treating of finished cloth so it holds a shape in wet wind. Before your hull has touched salt water, a household has spent years making a rectangle of fabric. Now the redeeming half. A wool sail that gets looked after could last 30 to 50 years. Spread 8,000 hours across the short end of that, and you're carrying about 260 weaving hours a year. Across the long end, roughly 160. That arithmetic is mine, not theirs. Nobody in 1030 amortised anything. But the shape of it held whether it was written down or not, and it works in your favor. You buy decades of propulsion, and you pay for all of it before the first voyage. Iron comes next, and it comes out of a bog. Bog ore was smelted in small batches, and the yield was punishing. About 20 kilos of ore might give you 3 or 4 kilos of usable metal. Every rivet in that hull represents ore dug, charcoal burned, wood felled to make the charcoal, and a smith's day. How many rivets? Nobody counted Skuldelef 1s, and I won't invent one. What we have is a bracket from other vessels. A small 7-meter boat called Gislinge took about 450. The reconstruction of that 30-meter warship took just under 8,000 rivets. Timber is its own discipline. Viking builders split logs radially instead of sawing across them, so every plank followed the grain and came out strong and springy at low weight. That's clever, and it isn't free. It needs the right trees, someone who can read a trunk before it opens, transport, seasoning, and a crew who can work overlapping planks into a shell that flexes without leaking. Rope is worth getting right, because most people get it wrong. Modern reconstructions often reach for hemp, mainly because hemp is easy to buy now. The museum's own craft research points instead to lime bast as a dominant material, alongside fibers from pine, hide, hair, and wool, and it notes there's no firm evidence for hemp production in Viking-age Scandinavia. Othere, a Norwegian trader we'll come back to, told an English king that walrus hide made good ship rope, and that the tribute he collected included long cables of whale or seal hide. Then tar, and under the tar, the shipworm that eats a hull from below. Museum experiments with tar and oil coatings found they slow the worm down. They don't stop it. Add every one of those up and you own something that earns nothing, because an empty hull earns nothing. Now you have to fill it. That decision is where owners separated. You answered furs or stone a few minutes ago. The real answer is both. And the interesting part is the ratio. Start with stone, because stone is the receipt that proves the network existed. Whetstones, sharpening blocks. The least romantic object in the Viking world, and one of the best documented. Researchers analyzed 1,698 whetstones recovered at Kopang, a trading site on the Oslofjord, and traced them back to source. 1,017 came from Mostedmarka, 257 from Eidsborg. The remaining 424 came from somewhere else again. Those stones traveled. Mostedmarka material turns up roughly 1,100 kilometers away by sea, at Ribe in Denmark. The study reckons supply into Ribe ran to at least hundreds of whetstones a year, which tells you something the sagas won't. This was not a trade in treasure. It was a trade in tools, quarried in volume, moved by ships like yours, sold to people who needed an edge on a blade and had no local rock worth using. Soapstone bowls went the same way, and the everyday sort weighed 5 or 6 kilos each. Dense cargo does two jobs at once. It fills a hold that would otherwise be half air, and it sits low, which suits a broad hull in a following sea. Now the furs. Value per ton is where light goods win, and they win enormously. Pelts, walrus ivory, feathers and down, hide cable, all of it compresses, none of it spoils quickly, and a small volume can outvalue a hold of rock. Why not fill the ship with furs and skip the stone entirely? Because a market for luxury is a market of very few buyers. Stone finds a customer in every port with a smith in it. Ivory might need one particular rich man to be in town, in a buying mood, with silver already weighed out. Load your hold with rarity, and you've made the whole business depend on a single conversation. Owners who got this right built a portfolio. Bulk to fill capacity. Value to lift the worth of the hold. Enough spread that no one refusal sinks the voyage. And then there's the part of this trade the ledger tidies away. Enslaved people were a major export of this network. Not a colorful detail, not a footnote in a business case. A commodity in the same holds, moving the same routes, sold in the same markets to the same buyers. Any account of Viking commerce that leaves that out isn't an account of Viking commerce. Which brings us to Othere, who explains the real advantage and who isn't a hero either. Late in the 9th century, a Norwegian by that name turned up at the court of King Alfred in England, described his life. And somebody wrote it down. He said he was a wealthy man. His wealth was not built on clever haggling in a marketplace. He owned 600 tame reindeer, and he was not selling them. He received tribute from the smee, marten skins, reindeer hides, bear skins, feathers, a coat, long cables of hide. He sailed north for walrus ivory and walrus hide. Read that as economics, and it's simple. His edge existed before the ship was ever loaded. He controlled supply, and that supply was taken as much as bought. Coercion at the top of the chain was subsidizing the margin at the bottom of it. So you've got your cargo, your crew, your rope, and your sail. Every hour that ship sits at anchor, all of it is losing you money. Time to go. Othere gave a distance as well as a boast. From Syringe's Heel, a place most scholars link to the Kaupang area, to Hedeby was 5 days sailing. Hold that number loosely. It's one man's journey in one set of winds, not a timetable. Hedeby is where you're going, and it's worth knowing why. It sat at the neck of the Jutland Peninsula, on the narrow land bridge between the North Sea system and the Baltic. The gap between navigable water on either side was about 18 kilometers. That geography made Hedeby a transfer point rather than a destination. Goods came off ships, crossed the neck, and went on to other ships. Kings understood exactly what they were holding, and they controlled and protected it accordingly. Between you and that market, 8 people and the weather. On the 2004 trial, Ottar's crew of 8 split into 2 watches of 4. 4 hours on, 4 hours off, round the clock. 4 people can sail her and can tack her in reasonable conditions, which is why the number works at all. The report also records fatigue building across the days, because off watch on an open working freighter is not the same thing as sleep. They eat too. A later Norwegian legal tradition, later than our ship and worth flagging as later, gives a daily shipboard ration of about 880 grams of flour, 285 grams of butter, and at least 4 liters of water per person. Run that out over a week for 8 people. Roughly 49 kilos of flour, 16 of butter, 224 liters of water. That's hold space you can't sell, and it's the first thing a delay eats into. Now the voyage, and this is where the opening numbers came from. In 2004, Ottar sailed from Hedeby toward Gdask with about 17 tons of stone ballast aboard instead of goods. She covered 390 nautical miles over the ground in 4 days, 1 hour and 25 minutes. The direct route would have been 349. Average speed made good, about 4 knots, 86 nautical miles a day. And then a headwind arrived. Over 14 hours and 10 minutes, the ship sailed 35.7 nautical miles through the water and advanced 11.2 toward where she was going. 31% of the effort became progress. Velocity made good, 0.8 knots. Call it 1.5 kilometers an hour. Walking pace for 14 hours with every watch working and every person eating. Read that as a business event rather than a weather event, and it looks like this. A headwind doesn't slow your ship. It extends your payroll, burns your provisions, delays your sail, keeps your capital sitting motionless inside a wooden box, and it can make the market you're sailing toward disappear before you arrive in it. Somewhere past 400 nautical miles, the withy holding the side rudder gave out and had to be replaced. 3 hours, on a voyage that went well. Organic fittings wear. Spare cordage, plus somebody who knows how to fit it, is working capital rather than equipment. You arrive. The stone sells, the furs sell, silver comes across the table. Except silver in 1030 isn't money, not until you've done something to it. Payment came by weight. Coins existed and were spreading through the 11th century, but a coin was often treated as a piece of silver rather than a face value. Alongside coins, ingots, cut ornaments, arm rings chopped into fragments, the whole category has a name, hack silver, and it's exactly what it sounds like. The British Museum holds a fragment of a silver ingot from the early 10th century weighing 13.4 grams. Along its surface are small test nicks, where somebody cut in to check whether the inside matched the outside. That's the transaction. Physically, weigh the payment. Judge the quality. Nick it if you're unsure. Cut or combine pieces until both parties agree the pile matches the deal. Then guard it, because it's small, portable, and worth a hold of stone. So the balance and weights in your kit are not set dressing. They're your till, your fraud control, and your assay bench folded into one small case. What's any of it worth? Careful here, because this is where scripts start inventing. There's a runic ring from Forsa in Sweden, 9th or 10th century, read as setting a fine at 1 ox or 2 ri, with an ri estimated at around 25 grams of silver. That puts an ox near 50 grams. It's a vivid figure, and it is one regional legal interpretation, not a price list you can carry into Hedeby in 1030. Then there's the cost of being allowed to trade at all. Hedeby's rulers protected the market and taxed it. That much is solid. Kings levied duties and charges, and protection was the product they were selling. What is not solid is the rate. No Hedeby tariff for 1030 has been recovered, by ship or by commodity, and anyone who quotes you a percentage made it up. So we won't. In our ledger, everything you pay to be there goes into one line: duty, gifts, loading, lodging, brokerage, and the cost of every day you sit waiting for the right buyer to walk past. Your hold is empty. Your purse is heavy. And this is the exact moment most owners lost the voyage. Stand on the Hedeby waterfront and look at what you own. A ship with nothing in it. A crew with nothing to do. Silver that isn't growing. Time to build that ledger. And I'll show you the guesswork as it goes in. Since no Viking prices survive, we'll use units instead of coins. Your outbound cargo costs 100 units to buy. Call the total cost of the round trip, meaning food, wear, repairs, market charges, the crew, and the waiting, 30 units. I chose both of those figures so the arithmetic stays legible. Neither one is a recovered Viking number. One more term before the numbers move. Markup on cost. Buy at 100, sell at 130, and that's a 30% markup. It is not a 30% margin. Different sum, and people mix them up constantly. We'll use markup throughout. Now watch what happens on a good voyage. You sell out at a 25% markup. Excellent trading. Better than excellent, because that's a price you'd take every single time. 25 units of gross profit on the trip. Then you sail home empty, since nothing in the market appealed and you'd rather carry silver than risk goods. 30 units of cost against 25 units of profit. You are down 5. That's a successful voyage that lost money. You did everything right. You sold well, the ship came home whole, the crew came home alive, and the venture finished in the red. Because you paid for 2 passages and sold on 1. The fix is not a bigger markup. 2 loaded legs at 15% each also make 30 units. Same total, half the trading skill required. At our 30 unit cost, 2 15s break even. 1 leg on its own has to hit 30% to do the same job. Trading skill isn't the lever here. 2 ordinary deals beat 1 brilliant one. And that's the sentence the whole business runs on. So what goes in the hold for the trip home? Hedeby was fed by Western and Southern networks, and it took in cloth, glass, pottery, millstones, salt, wine, copper, tin, and lead. Look at that list through Norwegian eyes, and half of it is scarce at home. Fine cloth is light and valuable. Salt preserves food, and everybody needs it. Copper, tin, and lead are inputs a craftsman can't work without. Millstones are heavy, dull, and productive for decades, which reframes the question every owner had to answer. You are not asking what you can sell in Hedeby. You are asking what the people who just bought your cargo are holding that your neighbors at home would pay more for. The most profitable cargo of the voyage is the one you haven't bought yet. Run the model with both legs working. 30% out, 30% home. 60 units of gross profit, 30 of cost, 30 units left standing. Good year. That's the season you buy a share in another ship. Set that beside the ordinary version. 18% out, 15% home. Those are respectable numbers. Any trader alive would take them. 33 units of gross profit against 30 units of cost. 3 units. That's the whole year. It also explains why so few of these ships had a single owner. A runestone at Roos records that a man called Asser Sachs held a ship jointly with Arn. We don't know what they used it for, but shared ownership of vessels is documented, and the museum's own reading is that Skoldilev 1 could have belonged to a magnate, or to a group of merchants pooling hull and cargo between them. Split 4 ways. The arithmetic is unsentimental. 4 equal partners in a voyage clearing 30 units take 7.5 each. In the year that clears 3, they take 3/4 of a unit each. In the year that loses 20, they lose 5 apiece, instead of one person losing 20. Pooling doesn't make a thin route rich. It makes a bad year survivable. And don't call it insurance. There's no outside party here who pays you after a loss. The partners simply agreed to lose together. That matters more than it sounds, because everything we've just built, the hull, the sail, the cargo, and the silver from the first sail, is now sitting inside one wooden box, on open water, at the same time. 2 things could take all of it. One of them had a face. Around 8:30, a missionary named Ansgar traveled toward Birka, the trading town on Lake Mälaren in Sweden, in company with merchants. His biographer Rimbert says they met pirates. The merchants fought. They lost. The attackers took the ships and the property aboard, and the survivors walked away overland with almost nothing. Rimbert was writing a saint's life rather than a police report, and the story is shaped to make its subject look protected by God, so read it carefully. But the loss mechanism inside it is completely legible, and it's the owner's actual nightmare, not a slow decline in margin. Competitors arriving and removing the productive asset and the working capital in a single afternoon, which is also why a merchant with a nar full of stone didn't moonlight as a raider. Different hull, different crew size, different business entirely. Piracy pulled ships out of the trade that people like you depended on. It wasn't a side hustle. It was your competition. Armed, the other thing that could take it had no face at all. Near Kaupang, in Norwegian ground, lies a ship dated to 998. It's called the Kulstad ship, probably a nar, likely 20 to 22 meters long and about 4.5 meters wide. Longer than Skoldilev 1, though not as broad. It wrecked. Over time, it stranded and silted in, and the earth kept it. Its cargo included Eidsborg whetstones, the same quarry we were loading 20 minutes ago. Here's what we don't know, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. We don't know where she was headed. We don't know how she came to grief, because no storm has been documented. No reef, no fight. We don't know who owned her, how many stones were aboard, or what any of it was worth. What survives is the shape of a trading vessel with a quarry cargo inside it that never reached a buyer. That's the picture to hold, not a dramatic sinking. A business that stopped. Because think about what was aboard at the moment it stopped. Most businesses spread their risk across a building, a warehouse, a road, and a bank. This one put the factory, the inventory, the cash register, the entire staff, and the only route to market on a single wooden platform and pushed it into the North Sea. If you'd already sold your outbound cargo and spent the silver on a return load, then the hull, the first voyage's profit, and the second cargo were all in the water together. So after all of it, the sheep, the bog iron, the headwind, the scales in the wreck. What does this business actually pay? 4 outcomes, all of them modeled, all in our units, none of them recovered from an 11th century book. Good voyage. Both holds loaded, both sold at a 30% markup. 60 in gross profit, 30 in cost. Plus 30. That's a strong result on a cargo principal of 100, and it's the year you buy into another ship. Ordinary voyage. 18 out, 15 home. Plus 3. 2 respectable pieces of trading and a full season of risk, and it clears about 3% of your cargo capital. Weak voyage. 10% out, nothing home. Minus 20. No disaster at sea, just a slow market, and an empty hull, which costs exactly the same to sail as a full one. And the wreck. You lose the ship, the return cargo, and everything already spent to get there. Less whatever washes up. If your first sail went straight into the second cargo, the wreck takes that profit too. The people aboard were not a line item, and they shouldn't be written as one. Now the question the title asked, could you get rich owning one of these? Yes, but almost never, because you owned the ship. The ones who got rich had 3 things at once, and every one of them sits outside the hull. Supply, controlled before the voyage. That's Othere. Reindeer he wouldn't sell, tribute he took, a northern route he knew, and others didn't. He wasn't winning in the market. He'd already won before he got there. 2 paying legs, which means 2 ordinary sales rather than 1 brilliant one. And capital that outlives a bad result. Enough left over, in partners or land or cattle or another hull, to send a second ship after the first one fails to come back. Miss any of the 3 and the arithmetic turns on you. A trader with a fine cargo and no reserve is 1 storm from finished. A trader with reserve and no supply advantage is buying at everybody else's price. A trader with both who sails home empty is running a very expensive delivery service, which is why the fastest sailor in the fjord was rarely the richest man in it. So here's what you were buying, and it was never the boat. You were buying a gap. Somewhere in Norway, a whetstone was ordinary and cheap. Somewhere in Denmark, the same stone was scarce and worth more. Between those 2 facts sat a distance nobody had closed, and a hull was simply the tool for standing inside it for 1 season. Wood you could replace. Timber grows back, and Skoldev one's own repairs prove her owners replaced plenty of it. The gap was the fragile thing. Other people found it. Prices moved. Kings changed the terms. And 1 bad night could close it from both ends at once. You did not own a ship. You owned the distance between 2 prices, and the sea could erase both. One last thing about that gap, because there's a version of this business where it opens even wider, and there's no ship anywhere in it. Everything we price today assumed a hold, a sail, and open water. Take the water away, and the same arbitrage runs overland, on animals, across a continent, with a toll at every border and no way home except back through every man who already taxed you once. The margins were bigger. So was the failure rate. That's the caravan. It's on screen now.